Valerie. Judy had been rolling the name silently off her tongue for the last half hour, contemplating what it now meant to her. She'd awoken to the bright glare of the sun peeking through the window, remembering they'd forgotten to draw the curtains before falling asleep the night before. For a moment, she'd considered burying her head further into V's back to shield her eyes and go back to sleep. Rest had been in short supply the last few days. Combined with the stress of everything else that had been going on, she'd nearly succumbed to the thought before remembering they would soon need to head out once more to visit the neurologist Pan Am had contacted. As she lifted her head off her pillow and propped herself up on her elbow, Judy observed the woman sleeping next to her. V had hardly moved all night. Her face was now relaxed and her mouth slightly agape, and Judy had needed to stifle a laugh as she listened to the quiet wheezing of air passing through her nose as she slept. Resting her arm next to V, making sure not to wake her, Judy's eyes wandered across her body towards the fresh tattoo exposed on her skin. I'm in love, and I'm loved. Memories from the night before had been replaying in her mind as she kept watch. The sparkle in V's eyes when she'd shown Judy the words she added to the tattoo. The tightness of her grip when she'd twisted away from her and pointed her mantis blade at her. The devastation in her face when she'd spoken of her rape as a teenager. More than anything else, though, the sound of V's voice when she had spoken the words Judy hadn't realized until that moment she had yearned to hear throughout so much of her life, echoed through her mind. The name V had revealed to Judy the night before, Valerie, was a name she had been given by her parents when she was born and had carried for nearly half her life. It was her name as she had lived in poverty on the streets, been sold to a gang by her own father for their twisted pleasure, and the name she had left behind along with her childhood. Judy now understood why V had not wanted to revisit that part of her past, and why the name meant nothing to her any longer. Allowing her eyes to linger on the two words that stood out upon her skin, Judy decided at that moment that V was the true name of the woman she was now in love with, not Valerie. That name is dead, and I'll never use it. There was a dull throb in her head, no doubt a souvenir from the abundance of drinking they had done the night before. After a while, the temptation became too great to ignore as Judy moved her hand up to gently weave her fingers through V's hair, the vibrant pink strands spilling over the pillow she slept upon. V breathed in deeply and shifted closer to Judy, a quiet yet deep purr coming from her as she did so. Continuing the motion, Judy put her head back on the pillow and pulled V in closer until their faces were inches apart. Though V's eyes remained shut, Judy saw a hint of smile form at the corners of her lips. Mornin' you, Judy whispered, feeling her heart flutter as V's smile slowly widened. Morning, V managed, still refusing to open her eyes. Not yet. Judy breathed a small laugh, allowing her hand to trace its way across V's jawline. Now. Big day today. V's eyes slowly cracked open, taking in the sight of her Judy, who looked adorningly back at her. Judy kept her eyes on V, and they remained staring into one another as the words they had exchanged out loud the night before were exchanged once more, silently, through the intensity of their gaze. V's eyes suddenly widened as she groaned. Oh, fuck. I'm so sorry, Judy. Confused, Judy replied in a low voice. You don't need to be sorry, V. Yeah, I do. I dragged you through so much shit. Nearly killed someone last night. Almost. Judy put her finger against V's lips, silencing her. She knew where V was going with her thoughts. The ferocity on V's face the night before as she had pointed her deadly mantis blade at her was still fresh in her mind. But there had been tenderness also, and a realization that what they both felt for one another was no longer something casual or ordinary. Quiet, V. Yeah, you hurt someone last night. Judy continued, tracing her fingers across V's face that had winced in shame at the memory of the previous night. But it doesn't mean you're a bad person, or else you wouldn't give a damn about what happened last night. Trust me, couldn't fall in love with someone who was. Tilting her face into Judy's touch, V lifted her head back and allowed Judy's fingers to trace against the inside of her neck, causing her lips to part slightly. V's breath escaped her as her own hand now found its way onto Judy's cheek. Judy allowed V's palm to explore the curve of her jaw, gently tilting her head in response to V's touch. As their hands began to explore one another, Judy pulled away and her gaze sharpened. Do you trust me, V? Yes. You know I'd never hurt you, right? I know. Is this okay? Can I touch you? V whispered. Yes. Taking hold of V's wrist, Judy guided V's fingers to her own face, slowly dragging them down her lips, her mouth parting as V's fingers traced across her lower lip. We need this. As their breathing intensified, Judy released her grip as her hands found their way to the back of V's head and pulled her into a deep kiss, which didn't end. As their lips connected against each other, Judy gasped when she felt V's tongue enter into her mouth and began to dance across her own. Their hands were now moving faster, exploring further, their movements becoming more urgent with each passing moment. Judy glided her hand across V's shoulder, moving up and down the length of her arm before returning and slowly drifting down to V's breast. V broke the kiss and moaned as Judy slid her hand under V's shirt and cupped one of her breasts, gently grazing her thumb across her nipple. They kissed again as V's hands now found their way under Judy's top. No longer able to contain her passion, Judy pushed herself up and tore off her shirt as V propped herself up by her elbows and did the same, tossing their clothes wildly across the room. Judy quickly found her way to V's underwear. Her thumbs gripped the fabric of the waistband and pulled them off with an urgency which was rapidly building. V did the same, sending Judy's underwear flying across the room. They crashed together once more, now fully nude as their passion began to overwhelm them. Judy buried her face in V's neck, kissing and sucking upon her skin as V moaned before allowing her teeth to graze the skin of V's earlobe. She felt V's hand slide across her thigh before grabbing hold of her ass, pulling her in closer. V finally broke away as she gripped onto Judy's shoulders. But just as she was about to push her aside and roll on top of her, Judy pushed back, keeping V pinned under her. With their eyes locked, Judy allowed herself a moment to take in everything she was feeling at that moment. The love, the hunger, the desire. It all crashed into her at once, nearly overwhelming her. Finally breaking her gaze, Judy raised herself slightly and began to twist her own body, lifting her leg over V's face. Bringing her mouth towards V's folds, she straddled over her and moaned loudly as she felt V's tongue begin to tease her entrance. Judy dove her head down, her own tongue finding its way across V's clit, taking pleasure in the sounds she heard behind her even as she moaned in response to what V was doing with her own tongue. V's hands gripped Judy's behind, pulling her down closer as Judy tried to steady herself, her own tongue flicking and circling about faster. Before long, Judy could sense V was close as her breathing became ragged and her own movements hastened. Suddenly, V tensed and cried out, "Oh, Judy, fuck!" Trembling, Judy continued her own motions and guided V through her orgasm, even as she felt her own building within her. V gripped her tighter as her tongue moved with a renewed vigor, allowing one of her hands to move to Judy's entrance and slipping a finger inside of her. Judy screamed and collapsed as wave after wave of pleasure overtook her. Finally, when V had planted a final soft kiss upon her and had pulled her mouth away, Judy swung herself back over and collapsed next to her. They embraced one another in silence as they caught their breath and slowly grounded themselves once more. As they laid together, Judy stared into V's eyes, her mind drifting back to the night before. Judy had known that V had grown up on the streets of Night City, and those streets were a vicious and unforgiving place. She had seen more than her fair share of brutality and cruelty in the years she had lived there since her grandparents had left. But still, she could never have imagined the horrors V had endured back there, especially as a child. Judy wondered how she had survived afterwards, alone and betrayed by the very people she had trusted the most to love her and take care of her. But she had also decided it was not something she would ever choose to know or to ask V to talk about. She couldn't imagine how difficult it had been for V to relive that memory, but it was no longer a secret between them and was now out in the open. Judy knew it undoubtedly fed into many of the traits she had observed in V during the time she had known her. Her inward nature and defensiveness, the lack of intimacy she had known throughout her life, the walls she kept trying to build up around her. Judy was resolved to change things between them, though, and to make sure V knew she wouldn't allow what had happened to her as a child to define her or their relationship, that she was much more than a survivor to her. After resting a few minutes longer, Judy twisted and reached for her hollow, nearly knocking it off the nightstand. After glancing at the time, she looked back to V. "Gotta meet Pan Am downstairs in an hour." V sighed and groaned. "I'm so tired. I just want to go back to sleep." Judy found it hard to disagree, given how tired she also was. The last couple of days had been a whirlwind with little rest in between. But there was also a tingle of anticipation and nervousness as she thought ahead to the doctor they would soon be visiting. So many questions had run through her mind, and while she eagerly wanted answers, she had struggled with the knowledge that those answers might not be the ones she so desperately wanted to hear. Still, she couldn't suppress a flicker of hope. "Come on," Judy persisted, giving V a shake on her shoulder. "Plenty of time to sleep on the ride back. Gotta get that head of yours looked at." Rising out of bed, Judy walked over to the coffee maker that was in the room, determining after toying with it for a few moments that it wasn't working. With a frustrated grunt, she turned and headed to the bathroom, even as V had finally given in and was slowly sitting up in bed. Soon, they had finished getting cleaned up and had changed into their last set of clean clothes before they quickly stuffed their personals back into their bags. Judy noticed V had taken her pistol out and holstered it under her jacket and felt a small sense of relief that she hadn't brought it with her last night. The situation could have easily been far worse if she had. When they exited the elevator, they saw Pan Am standing in nearly the same spot she had greeted them the evening before. Judy glanced towards the small desk the clerk was seated behind near the entrance, spotting 3 cups of steaming coffee stacked on top of it. "She sure as hell knows how to think ahead." "Mornin'," Pan Am said, eyeing them both suspiciously. "Late night, huh?" "We didn't stick around much later after you left," V grumbled, hoping the lie would suffice. It's a pretty quiet hotel, isn't it?" Without waiting for an answer, Pan Am turned and started toward the door with Judy and V following closely behind. Judy wondered just how much Pan Am had heard the night before. She knew they had gotten back much later than V had implied, and was also quite certain that they had been anything but quiet upon their arrival. But Pan Am's comment seemed to be the only hint she would give that she had heard anything at all. Grabbing their coffees, the 3 exited out the door and walked towards the truck. "I'll drive," Pan Am said. Judy and V climbed into the back before they once again had set off down the highway. "How far is it?" Judy asked. "Not far, maybe 20 minutes, Pan Am replied. "Matt set up shop close to the city so he could stay and practice." "Matt?" V inquired. Pan Am's eyes narrowed before she answered curtly. "Yes, V. Matt." Judy glanced over at V to see if she was going to push the topic or not. She was starting to feel more comfortable around Pan Am, but this was one topic she was definitely going to steer clear of. Fortunately, V pressed Pan Am for her. Okay, you know you can't leave that hanging out there. What's the deal with Matt? V asked in as seductive a tone as possible. If looks could kill, Pan Am's would have been a death blow. Fuck off, V. Oh, come on, Pan. You know I'm just fucking with you. If this guy's gonna be tooling around in my head, just wanna know who he is. Pan Am remained quiet for a long period of time, and Judy had started to think she wasn't going to delve any deeper into the topic when she finally spoke. Fine, but only because you need his help. Got it? I don't want to hear any shit from you about any of it. Got it? V put her hands up defensively. I'm all ears, Pan. With a defeated sigh, Pan Am began. I ran into him a couple years back in Night City. Some scavs had hit our camp and we had a few injuries. A woman who was with us, Janet, I think, she got her head banged up pretty bad. We tried to get her into the NCMC, but of course, without some level of trauma service, you're completely fucked. Hang on. Pan Am paused as she passed the car in front of them, causing Judy to dig her fingernails into the fabric of the seat as they barreled down the opposite lane, narrowly missing an oncoming car. After the blare of the horn had receded into the distance, Pan Am continued with the story. Anyway, some doc was walking into the center and just offered to help us out of the blue. He took her in and was able to patch her up. And for his troubles, he wound up losing his job, those fucking rat bastards. After that, he left Night City and went private out here, which is where we're headed. V asked the same question which had been on Judy's mind as Pan Am told her story. Okay, that all makes sense. So, what's the deal with you two? Come on, Pan, you can trust us. Another awkward silence followed as Pan Am shifted uncomfortably in her seat before throwing her arms into the air. We had a quick thing, all right? One night, one and done. He wanted more, and it didn't mean to me what it did to him. Guy was good looking and was a great lay. There, you fucking happy? Judy was glad that V only responded by putting her hands in the air once more, not probing further. So much fucking drama. Before long, Pan Am pulled off the highway and onto a small side street. As Judy looked out the window, the truck pulled into the parking lot of a small office building situated next to a nearly vacant strip mall. On the front of the building was a bright white sign. Deacon's Medical. Here we are, Pan Am announced. They exited the truck and walked through the entrance. An odd smell of sanitized air immediately hit their noses. It stung in Judy's nostrils and made her uncomfortable, bringing up unpleasant memories from prior hospital visits. The receptionist, a young woman with black hair tied behind her back and neatly manicured fingernails, glanced up at them and smiled. Hi, welcome to Deacon's Medical. How can I help you? We're here to see Matt Deacon, Pan Am replied with a wave of her hand. You can let him know it's Pan Am. Just a moment, please. The receptionist's eyes lit up with a blue glow as she relayed the message. A moment later, the glow faded and she pointed to the door behind her. Right through this door, then turn left down the hallway. It'll be the first door on your right. Judy went ahead and opened the door, leading the way as they followed the instructions they had been given. A growing sense of urgency had been slowly building within her, she realized, as she forced herself to slow down to allow V and Pan Am to catch up. Wish I wasn't so fucking anxious. As Judy opened the door they had been directed to, the three of them walked in and were surprised by what they saw. Perhaps it had been Judy's brief time living in the desert with the Aldecaldos, or maybe just the last 24 hours of having been on the road, but she had anticipated something completely different than the room in front of her. The examination room was surprisingly spacious, brightly lit, and filled with a variety of complex-looking diagnostic equipment, little of which looked familiar to Judy. A reclining examination chair was situated near the far wall next to an office desk, the surface of which was covered with data shards and paperwork. Above the desk, a large crane was suspended with a series of monitors attached to it. To her left was an open door which appeared to lead to what she guessed was a waiting room. All of it was shockingly clinical. Grateful that they were not standing in some seedy hole in the wall being managed by a ripperdoc who had spent more time in prison than in practice, Judy felt a sense of elation, which was beginning to lift her spirits. "Excuse me," a crisp voice called out from behind them. Turning around, a young man slipped between them and walked into the waiting room, gesturing for them to follow. Dressed in a lab coat and having the appearance of a well-groomed and relatively handsome man, Judy's eyes spotted the name tag he wore as he had walked past. Dr. Deacon. While Judy and V slowly followed him into the waiting room, Panam had casually strolled over to the desk on the opposite side of the room. Crossing her arms, her eyes scanned the various objects on the office desk, pausing at a pair of framed pictures which were prominently displayed. "Panam, you coming?" Judy asked. Taking a deep breath, Panam turned and walked towards the waiting room. "Yeah." As Judy turned and followed Panam, she was pleased to see the spark of hope which she had felt was continuing to burn brighter. Though much smaller than the adjoining examination room, the space seemed cozy and inviting with a handful of chairs scattered throughout the room and a sofa placed against the wall. A pair of monitors rested on opposite walls, currently displaying what Judy assumed was the local Phoenix news programming. The doctor sat down in a chair opposite the sofa and gestured for them to sit. Judy and V sat down on the sofa while Panam leaned against the wall near the doorway, her arms remaining crossed. Glancing back at Panam, the man turned to face them, smiled, and extended his hand to Judy. "Hi, I'm Dr. Deacon, though being friends of Panam, you can just call me Matt. And you are?" Taking his hand and shaking it, Judy told him her name. "Judy Alvarez." Judy then turned her head to the woman who sat next to her. "And this is V." Matt released his grip of Judy's hand and extended it towards V, who, Judy noticed, had seemed to have taken it with a degree of hesitation. "V, it's good to meet you. Panam told me a bit about you and your case." Both Judy and V glanced over at Panam, who silently stared back with a blank expression on her face. Following their eyes, Matt turned his head towards Panam. His eyes lingered on her for a moment before he turned back to Judy and V. Rare moment when she's speechless, isn't it? Before she could stop herself, Judy burst out laughing. Perhaps it had been the stress of the last 24 hours, or maybe even longer than that. But something within her had snapped at the admittedly mundane joke, and her laughter continued even after she had forgotten why she was laughing. V looked at her with an expression which was a mixture of confusion and amusement, as a slight hint of a smile formed at the corners of her lips. "Sorry," Judy apologized as she desperately worked to calm and compose herself. "Just been a long couple of days." "I understand," Matt replied as he turned his head back to V. "So, like I mentioned, Panam gave me some background about what's been going on with you. Having spent many of my earlier years in Night City, how about I start by telling you a little about myself first so you know who I am?" "That would be good," V replied, her eyes remaining steady and unmoving. Matt smiled and continued. "Not sure what Panam already told you, but here's a brief summary of my background. I was born in Chicago back in '48 and grew up there, eventually attending and graduating from Loyola University in '74 with my medical degree in neurology. I was offered a position as an attending neurologist at Night City Medical Center, which was a great opportunity for me at the time. 10 months after I started, I bumped into our friend here." Matt gestured back at Panam. "And less than 24 hours later, I was terminated from my position." "So you fucking blame me?" Panam's voice cut through the air as her face turned red with anger. Matt sighed without looking back at her. "No, I don't blame you. And for your benefit, V, you should know that my time at NCMC was, frankly, horrible. I got into medicine because I wanted to help people, and I happened to be good at it. But at that place, I saw so many people get turned away that I could have helped only because they couldn't afford treatment. Now, It's not to say that it isn't like this all over the world, or at least as far as I've traveled, but Night City is on a whole different level of corruption. Matt then turned to look at Panam, even as his voice remained steady. So no, I don't blame you, Panam. I'm glad I was able to help your friend back then, and I would do so again if I had to do it over. The room was filled with silence as the four of them looked at one another, the awkwardness of the situation nearly becoming unbearable to Judy.
A lover's quarrel indeed.
Finally, Matt turned back to V. So, that's a little bit about me. V, if you're good with it, I'd like to take a closer look and see what we're dealing with. Judy glanced at V and gave a small nod of her head. V still seemed somewhat hesitant about the whole situation, but with a shrug of her shoulders, stood and followed Matt back into the examination room. As Judy rose to follow, Matt stopped. Just V for now, please. Should only take a half hour or so. Judy stopped, having been caught off guard as V glanced back at her and gave a small smile. As the door closed, Judy frowned and went back to the couch, throwing herself into it as her frustration boiled over. What the fuck? Telling me I can't be with her when he's just taking a look? What kind of bullshit is that? Feeling restless, Judy stood back up and walked over to a small table which had been set up in the back corner of the room, spotting a coffee maker resting on its surface with a full pot of coffee having already been brewed. Pouring herself a cup, Judy began to pace the room as her eyes glanced about but didn't settle on anything. Sitting back down, she waited. After some time had passed, Judy had been watching one of the monitors when she sensed Panam was staring at her. Just gonna keep staring or what? Panam quickly glanced away. Sorry, you just seem on edge is all. Yeah, go figure. I guess being shut out and not knowing what's going on with someone I care about has that effect. Judy finished her coffee in a final large gulp and set the cup down. Putting her head into her hands, she took a deep breath to try to calm herself. Sorry. Just hate this waiting crap. Pushing herself off the wall, Panam walked over to the coffee maker and poured herself a cup. I get it. Matt's actually a good person. Someone we can trust. Judy looked up. You trust him? Panam looked down at her coffee. Yeah, I guess so. As much as you can trust anyone in this fucked up world anyway. Guess I just thought he'd still be stuck in the same place we left things at. Judy was glad she had someone to talk to while she was forced to wait, finding that it was helping to keep her mind off of what was going on behind the closed door. So he's not? Stuck, I mean. Apparently not. He's got some pictures on his desk of some woman. Not sure how she'd be his type. But whatever. I'm glad he's not hung up on things. Honestly, it's been stressing me out since I reached out to him. Judy considered what Panam had said, not entirely certain what to say. Well, guess it's good that he picked things up, and it's alright, Judy, Panam replied abruptly. All things considered, it's not exactly our biggest problem at the moment. Time for a change in subject. How are you doing? Judy's eyebrows raised. We're good. Sorry if we woke you last night when we got in. Panam smiled. No, I mean, how are you doing? Judy stared back at the nomad leader, trying to determine whether or not she could truly confide in her. They hadn't spent much time together, and there was still so much about her that she didn't know. Still, she knew V trusted her implicitly, and her dogged determination to help V had certainly garnered her admiration and respect. Putting her head back into her hands, Judy made her decision. Not so great, actually. I mean, I'm glad we're out here, and I'm really fucking grateful for everything you're doing for V. Panam put her hand up, silencing Judy. Alright, let's just cut the crap. I know we don't know each other well, but you can talk to me, okay? We both care about V. What's going on? Judy sighed, feeling her eyes growing heavy as the lack of sleep over the last few days was outweighing the caffeine which was currently working its way through her system. Guess I'm scared. I can tell she's trying to protect me, hiding what's happening to her from me. She's pretty lousy at it, actually. Gave me her jacket the other night back at camp. Fucking sleeve had flakes of dried blood all over it from where she's been wiping it. It feels like there's this space between us where neither of us are willing to go. Or maybe I'm just hoping we don't end up having to go there. Panem sat down on the couch next to Judy, holding her coffee in her lap with both hands. She's tough. A real survivor if I've ever met one. She's gonna get through this also. Seen her pull off more than one miracle already. Judy wanted to believe those words, but a gnawing doubt continued to eat away at her. Lifting her head, she stared absently at the monitor on the wall in front of her. I heard you two talking in the truck yesterday while you thought I was sleeping. I know she's scared. Panem looked at her, idly rolling the cup between her fingers as she seemed to consider what the right words were. Yeah, she is. But I guess that also means you heard her say she thinks she's fallen in love with you. You've been good for her, Judy. Judy's heart warmed as she turned to face Panem. She was beginning to understand why her and V had become such good friends in such a short amount of time. Yeah, I heard that too. And now, well, at least that's no longer a secret between us. Judy grinned, blushing slightly as she spoke. Panem returned the smile and gave Judy's shoulder a small shove. Yeah? Good for you two, gonks. Judy laughed as she playfully pushed back at Panem. Stop. I hate the mushy stuff. But being serious, she's just incredible. Guess I'd given up looking for someone like that a long time ago, especially after Maiko. Certainly didn't think I'd find her in Night City of all places. Guess at least one good thing came out of that shitty place. Panem finished her coffee and tossed the cup at the small wastebasket nearby, just missing its edge. Two things, I'd say. Before she could respond, Judy's attention snapped back to the door as the handle turned and it opened. Matt walked through first with a blank expression on his face Judy couldn't read. Panem, can I talk to you for a minute? He quickly asked, gesturing to the door to his left, which led back to the receptionist's office. Panem looked back at Judy, her eyes wide with uncertainty as she rose from the couch and walked towards him. Matt's gaze shifted to Judy, and she thought she saw something briefly flicker in his eyes as he did so. She's still in the exam room. Said she wanted to talk to you alone. Feeling her stomach beginning to churn, Judy stood, feeling a wave of dizziness pass over her which nearly caused her to stumble. Her mouth had suddenly turned dry as each step became increasingly difficult and cumbersome. Watching Matt lead Panem through the hallway and closing the door behind him, Judy walked into the examination room and turned to face V. V was sitting on the examination chair which had been fully reclined and positioned as a table, her head craned forward as she stared down at the floor in front of her. Hey, Jude, she called out in a faint voice, her head not moving.
No.
A lump quickly began to rise in Judy's throat as she felt her eyes beginning to sting. Oh, fuck. She hadn't meant to speak out loud, but the reality of the situation was already beginning to overwhelm her. Judy turned away, looking for anything in the room which would serve as a momentary distraction while she tried to prevent her emotions from overwhelming her. When V didn't say anything in response, Judy looked back at her, realizing that her own face was becoming contorted as she failed to contain the wave of emotions overcoming her.
This isn't happening. This isn't fucking fair.
Nodding to herself and blinking away the tears which had started to form as she tried to force her mind to accept what was happening, Judy walked towards V and gently put an arm around her shoulders. She remained motionless on the chair, and Judy could feel how tense the muscles in her shoulders were. Judy struggled to find the right words, but was unable to. Pulling away, V stood and walked across the room, her eyes absently gazing across the various objects in the room. Finally, she turned to face Judy, her expression remaining strangely emotionless as she leaned back against the wall. He said there's nothing he can do. If it was just brain damage, he might have been able to fix it with surgery or an implant. Problem is, my brain has basically become a giant cancer which is trying to kill my own body, programming my immune system slowly to attack itself. It hasn't seen anything like it before and doesn't have a clue how to stop it. As Judy listened, she began to feel a wave of nausea building up in the pit of her stomach as her hands grew cold. She leaned against the table V had sat upon a moment ago, taking deep breaths to keep herself from becoming sick.
This isn't supposed to happen.
V continued, her voice monotone and oddly detached. If nothing else, he said the headaches and bleeding will slow down as time goes on. Also gave me some pills to help. Said they'd help keep me moving right up until organ failure starts to set in. The words V was saying didn't fully register in Judy's mind. She stared at V, seeing the same emotionless eyes studying her. She knew V had to be struggling inside, perhaps at the breaking point even. Yet she couldn't bring herself to try to understand what V had to be feeling or to even pity her. Her mind was too focused on her own emotions, a jumbled mix of shock, anger, and despair.
Organ failure?
She tried to break out of her self-centered thoughts, willing herself to rush over to V and comfort her.
I need to be there for her.
But still, she couldn't move away from the table. He did give me the name of some professor who did research into DNA reconfiguration years back at some college up north. Dr. Klein or some such shit. Said he thought that since that's what's causing this, it might be the only thing that could help. Of course, the guy retired years ago and there's no info on where he is now, or if he would help, or if he's even alive. So, likely a dead end there too. Literally. V chuckled to herself as she realized the unintended humor of her last words. Whether it was truly a glimmer of hope from the long-shot bid for help that Matt had given V, or if she was simply unable to accept there wasn't anything that could be done, Judy seized upon her words as though her own life depended on them. Then why the fuck are you acting like this? We search this guy out and find him. That fucking simple. If he's such a goddamn genius about this shit, then he's gotta be able to help. For the first time since Judy had walked in the room, V's expression changed as sadness began to creep into her eyes. Judy, no! Fuck that, V. You promised me you wouldn't give up, remember? You fucking promised me! Refusing to accept V's defeat, Judy winced at her tone as she realized her own anger and rage was now being directed at the very person she so desperately wanted to comfort. I don't need you to remind me of my promise, Judy, V said calmly as her fingers traced against the spot on her skin where she had emblazoned her promise to Judy the night before. And I'm not giving up. Of course I'll try to chase this guy down and see if he can help. Hell, I'll chase down any lead I can get. But Judy, the time's probably going to come. Judy crossed her arms in front of her and vehemently shook her head. No, V, don't fucking talk that way. V closed her eyes and sighed, pressing forward. The time's going to come when we're going to need to face this. When I'm going to need to face this. I can't spend my last days jumping from one false hope to another, Judy. I just can't do it again. Judy stepped away from the chair, taking a step closer to V as a new clarity and focus began to form in her mind. V, if that time comes, we'll face it together. But we're not there yet, you hear me? We've still got time, and don't you fucking think for 1 second that I'm not in this with you. I know you are, Judy. And if it was just me, then, hell, this would be so much easier. V's voice cracked as she threw her hands in the air and quickly turned around to face the wall, not allowing Judy to see her eyes. Judy took another step closer. V was now within reach of her. Staring at her back, she could see her breathing was hastening as her shoulders rose and fell at an increasingly rapid pace. Judy reached out and rested her hands upon V's shoulders. Seeing V's head drop once more, Judy felt her heart drop as well. For hours, it seemed as though they had remained like that, the silence saying more than any words could. God damn it! V suddenly screamed at the top of her lungs before smashing her fist against the wall. Judy instinctively jerked away, startled by the sudden outburst. But the sound of V's sobbing quickly drew her back in like a magnet. No longer afraid of how she would react, Judy once again placed her hand on V's shaking shoulders. Gasping for breath, V reached back and placed a hand on top of Judy's, holding it there. I'm so fucking angry. Like it's just gonna explode out of me any second. But I can't even fucking think about it or try to figure all this shit out in my own head because all I can think about all the fucking time, Judy, is what'll happen to you when I... V stopped herself mid-sentence. Judy had been tightening her grip as V spoke as the realization of everything settled in. The wild mix of disconnected emotions which had been stirring within her head had been boiling away subconsciously, reducing until only a single feeling remained. Fear. The fear she felt for V, trying to face death once more. The fear she felt of losing V, a woman she hadn't even known a few months ago who had suddenly become the center of her entire world. Fear of what a future without her would look like. Finally, V turned, allowing Judy to see the agony on her face as her own tears began to spill down her cheeks. I need to ask something of you, Judy. Judy's eyes widened, and she quickly raised her hand, shaking her head. Don't. No, V. I know, Jude. It's completely fucking unfair of me to ask this of anyone, least of all you. But if you can't promise me this, Judy, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to face this, always worrying about you. Her own sobs breaking free, Judy continued to shake her head as V spoke. Please don't fucking ask me this, V. Please. V took a deep, shaky breath as she placed her hands upon Judy's shoulders and pulled her in close so they could rest their foreheads together. Promise me, if I die, that you're gonna live, Judy. As V spoke, Judy tried to pull away, but V held her tight as she refused to let go. Not survive, you hear me? Live. Don't want you wandering lost through the rest of your life thinking about me. Got it? You hear me? I think if I know you're gonna be okay, no matter what the fuck happens to me, it's gonna make this a whole lot easier for me in the days ahead. Could you just promise me that? Judy stayed in place, refusing to lift her head as tears fell from her eyes. You know, you're right, V. It's not a fair question. You don't get to tell me you love me, then pull this shit on me. It's not fucking fair, she managed. No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair, V replied, her voice remaining calm. We were supposed to have more time. Judy felt V's hand move to the back of her head, gently cradling her. We still might. And if not, quality over quantity, Jude. Hearing her own words, which she had told V back in her apartment in Night City repeated back to her, Judy pulled her head back and looked at V. The woman in front of her was vibrant, her eyes sharp and alive. There wasn't the faintest sign that behind those eyes was a woman who was slowly dying, second by second. V gave her a playful nudge as the corner of her lips raised up slightly in a small smirk. Heard that a while back. Can't remember who said it. Think it was this incredibly amazing, sexy woman who loved to churn out smut from the basement of a bar, if you can believe it. Judy managed a small chuckle.
We're a pair of hopeless fucking gonks, aren't we?
V laughed, a smile spreading across her face.
Completely hopeless.
Taking a step back, she rubbed V's shoulders.
Guess I'm going through with this. Ain't gonna lie, V. I don't want to talk about this at all. But you're right. I guess we might have to one day. And I'm sticking with you. I choose you every fucking day. You just keep your promise to me, alright? Then I'll do the same.
Seeing V staring back at her with expectant eyes, Judy said the words.
I promise.